Hello, everybody. Welcome, and thank you for joining us this National Science Week for ExBEERimental Science 2025. It's so good to be back after a year off. So before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands and where we're having this event, the Mulroney people of Nipaluna. I'd like to pay respects to elders past and present. Yeah. I'm out of practice. I had a year off, and now I'm all kind of getting all jittery. So our names are Matt. This is Kelsey. We're the co-founders of Science Made Beerable Inc., which is a not-for-profit that aims to make the science behind brewing fun, friendly, and easy to understand. And while we're at it, we also aim to make a more diverse and welcoming brewing community. This year, you may have noticed, we've changed things once again. In the past, we asked brewers to experiment, but this time, we've given 5 brewers the exact same recipe. Will the beers taste the same? We'll find out.
All right, so before we get started, we've just got some thank yous and housekeeping. So firstly, we're going to thank our sponsors who make the event possible. So that's National Science Week, Voyager Craft Malt, Bluestone Yeast, and Hot Products Australia for financial support and also for the ingredients that went into the brews today. Thanks to Shambles for hosting us yet again. They're our biggest supporters in terms of getting us the motivation to do this again, so thank you, Cornell and team. Thanks to Jim Woolley for the videography tonight. This will be recorded and posted on our socials and YouTube for watching back at a later date, so watch that space. Thanks to Brendan Veronice Audio and Visual for the audio and visual. As yet again, he does our events every year, and it's always amazing. This year we had Seb Godfrey do the amazing artwork and design for our event, and we have some merch available just by the bar, so check that out. We've got t-shirts and glasses available to purchase. Thanks again to our wonderful volunteers. This wouldn't be possible without our amazing volunteers. As Matt said, we're a not-for-profit, so we all are all volunteers here. So thank you to Jules, Reed, and Abby, and Tom. Please feel free to take photos during the night, post on socials, tag us, and we'll share. We've got Jules on the socials tonight. We also encourage you to ask brewers questions. So this is very much a join-in type event. In the past, we've had it live streamed, so we've kind of needed a little bit more of a hush in the audience. But this year, it's going to be more of a discussion. The structure of the night's also a bit different, the way that we're going to be discussing all of the beers at once rather than one by one, so much as we did in the past. So it's really much a discussion. The brewers will all pitch in. If you've got a question at any point or something you want to add, put your hand up, it's the best way. And we've got someone with a roving microphone to come around. It does pay to wait for the microphone as it is hard for everyone to hear, and we also want those questions picked up in the recordings as well. Some housekeeping for Shambles. Bathrooms are at the back where you came in. Fire escapes back out the front door or down the back as well. We'll also have a short intermission around 8:10, so you can nip to the loo or order some food or whatever you need. But yeah, without further ado, we are waiting for one brewer. There's a clear gap here. Will be joining us fashionably late, so I'm sure he'll make quite the entrance. So yeah, without further ado, get started?
Yeah.
If I've got anything?
Let's get started. I guess the only other thing is we've got 5 beers in front of you coming out on the panel of the paper paddle of all 5 different beers from the different breweries. At intermission, you can get yourself another schooner of your beer of choice for free as part of the ticket. So which one you prefer, you can get another schooner. If you're still thirsty after a litre of beer, see how you feel. But yeah, so keep that in mind. And then you can purchase beer after that, any of the event beers if you want as well. Cool. So, Kelsey, experimental design.
Oh yeah, so I guess to start with, we'll explain what experimental design is, or how we kind of designed this event tonight. So in science, when we want to understand something, we run an experiment, of course, and we control as many variables as possible to be able to tell what difference changing one variable might make to the end result. Here we've controlled a lot of the variables, so we've given all of these brewers the exact same recipe. So we went with an Aussie Pale Ale, so a pretty standard style of beer. We gave them the same recipe, so it's got the same ingredients, but we didn't control everything. So we gave some leeway for the brewer's sort of choice in the finer details, which we'll unveil as we go. We also, the brewer's equipment is going to vary. There's going to be difference in the local water chemistry. We didn't dictate that kind of detail. And also how the brewers interpret the recipe is going to change too. And maybe they wanted to vary from the exact recipe we gave them, or maybe they didn't mean to, but maybe did. All will be revealed. Yes, it's going to be interesting. So that's what we're here to explore.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we probably should introduce our panellists. I realise we haven't given them any love at all. So first up, we do have Will Thatchell, who's not sitting there at all. He's the blank seat. He will be here soon. I'm guessing any minute now. He said he'd be here at 7, which is not... Anyway, hopefully he turns up. Next, we've got Jerry Dooley from Hobart Brewers. Give a wave, Jerry. Woo! He's our resident home brewer, so he's got very different equipment, but it's quite miraculous how similar the beers are in the end too. Next up, we've got JJ King from Hopfields. Woo! We've got Sarah from King Island Brewery, or Brewhouse, sorry. And at the end, we've got Jack from Moo Brew. So what is the beer? What is the recipe? Well, put together a little spreadsheet. Not spreadsheet, what is it called? Slide, PowerPoint slide. We've gone techie this year. So the style, as Kelsey said, is an Australian-style pale ale. And for some of you, this might not mean a lot, these numbers, but for some of you, it might. So we had the original gravity specified. We told them the original gravity to start with. This is, I guess, the viscosity of the beer is a good way to think about it, the amount of sugars that are present in it. And then we told them the final gravity as well. So we gave them targets to aim for. So the idea is that the yeast will eat some of those sugars that are at the original gravity, and it will fall down to the final gravity. We then have ABV as well. That's alcohol by volume. So we were looking for 5 to 5.2. You've probably heard of ABV before, or how alcoholic it is. IBUs is another thing that we'll talk about a fair bit today. That's international bittering units. Another way to think of it is it's 1 IBU is 1 isoalpha acid per litre? Per gram. So it depends how bitter it is essentially. Colour, 13 EBC, might not mean that much to you. It's a colour we don't really have. Should have put a spectrum up there actually, would have been helpful. And turbidity is bright. So that is it bright? Is it hazy? That was the specification we gave them. We have some wonderful sponsors supporting this event, who we've already mentioned before, but Voyager provided the malt. So this is what we call a malt bill. So it's percentages that make up 100 in the end. So we wanted 75% of schooner, 10% of chit, and 15% of biscuit. We'll provide some more detail about this later. But something to note is what we didn't tell them. So we told them how much percentage-wise to use, but we didn't tell them mash temperature. Now mash temperature is the temperature that of the brew basically. So this can impact how much sugar comes out because of enzymatic action. And we'll talk about that a bit later as well. The other thing we told them was around hops. So thanks HBA for providing hops. They used something called Flex, which is an advanced hop product, which is basically liquid hops, essentially, liquid bitterness. If you came to this event 3 years ago, Deep South brewed a beer called Flex, which used this product. And we told them to use a minimum of 10 IBUs with that product. Got a few more graphs which will make this a bit clearer. And then use Eclipse and Vic Secret in the whirlpool to make up to 30 IBUs. But what we didn't tell them was the exact bitterness hop quantity. So we didn't tell them how much. So there is variation in how much they've used across these different beers. Another thing, and I know you're getting bombarded by information, but we will come back to this, but I just wanted to make sure you're all clear on what is in the beer before we start. We told them what to dry hop with. Dry hop is that aroma. It's that smell that you get from those beers. So we told them to dry hop at a rate of 2.5 grams per litre. So how many millilitres they have, put 2.5 grams of that hop type in per litre. But we didn't tell them when to add those dry hops, how often, once, twice, 3 times, or whether pre or post-terminal in fermentation. The last thing they added was the yeast. Thanks Bluestone for adding this yeast. We used a Michigan yeast, which is a medium flock yeast. But what we didn't tell them here was the specific temperature of the fermentation or how long to ferment for. We also didn't tell them things about finishing, so the time in the brake tank. Didn't tell them about carbonation. Looking forward to talking about carbonation, guys. Love carbonation. And we didn't tell them about clarification, so whether to... We told them make it bright, but if it doesn't come out bright, should you clarify or not? We didn't tell them whether or not to do that. Cool. I guess the other thing to note... Sorry, I may be going a bit rogue here. Am I going rogue? So we've also got a QR code. So you can scan this QR code, and you may have noticed it's in the corner of every single slide, so no matter where we are, you'll be able to scan it. And you can jot down some tasting notes for each of the 5 beers. We'd love to get some sensory kind of analysis. But also, there is a place where you can vote for your preference. So which beer you prefer. Not which beer is best, but which you prefer. Okay? I'm not playing favourites here. It's just about which one you would like to get a schooner of, which one you will get a schooner of. So make sure you scan that code or do it later as well.
Oh, Will's arrived.
Oh, Will's here. Why has he just walked on stage? I expected a grand entrance.
Ladies and gentlemen, Will from Van Dieman. Just don't fall off the stage this time. Sorry. Will's been a part of our event the very first year we ran it, and at the very end he fell off the stage. Probably doesn't remember. Sorry to embarrass you like that.
Cool. Why we chose these specific brewers? I think we've kind of talked about it, but there's a lot of differences in terms of equipment, experience, access to different things, like different ethoses, I guess, as well across the different breweries. So we picked them on purpose because we wanted differences. We didn't want 5 of the same beer because that would have been boring. So we were looking for differences. We were hoping for differences. And this panel was what we came up with, these 5 brewers from across Tasmania.
Yeah, so hopefully as we go along, the brewers can explain their decisions that may have made some variations in this beer. But I guess when we do an experiment in science, we have a hypothesis that we're trying to test. So in this case, we might have guessed when we ask 5 brewers to brew a beer with the same recipe, we might expect to end up with 5 of the exact same beer. Or we might expect to end up with 5 completely different beers. So those are our hypotheses. Tonight you'll get to test that for yourself. So your taste buds are the tools that you're going to use, and then the data is your feedback that you can use the QR code to give us that feedback, the sensory feedback, and we can discuss that, hopefully get some data by intermission and discuss what people are tasting and pulling out of those beers. And at the end, as Matt said, we will vote for our favourite beer or our preferred beer. Not that it's a competition or anything. Anyway, yeah, so I guess most people should have all 5 beers in front of them. There's still some being brought around, but we'll get into the tasting.
Yeah, let's do it. Brewers, don't forget to pick up your microphones. We can't hear you all the way down there. And this will be more like a discussion, so feel free to jump in at any time, please. So I guess one of the obvious differences I can first see is the clarity. So we've got some beers that are a bit more hazy, some a bit more bright. Anyone want to touch on the process here and why you think the clarity of beer ended up the way it did? Did everyone's beer come out bright to start with, or did they do anything to it? Jack, you're shaking your head.
Yeah, ours didn't. It was quite hazy, not as hazy as the haziest beer in the flight, but it wasn't far off, which there's nothing wrong with that from a process perspective, but given the recipe said bright, I was pretty determined to try and make it bright. I thought it drank pretty well being hazy, but I'm a stickler for following the rules. So I used some tank findings. We actually brewed this beer down at Manky Sally's, which is our little nano brewery in the brew pub, shameless plug there, down in Salamanca, but it's a totally different brewery to the big production brewery where all the Moo Brew beers come out of for national distribution. So we have a few limitations on how we operate down there, but I was pretty keen to get it right. So I used a bunch of tank findings to drop a bunch of the protein polyphenol haze out of it. It still didn't get, it was bright, but not, I mean, it's still not Pilsner bright, but ours is pretty bright. So then I ran it through a little cartridge filter, which in the big brewery, our filtration methods are totally different on a large scale, but our little tanks down there are only 340 litres, so I pushed it through a cartridge filter just to polish it a little bit. So I worked pretty hard. There was a lot of input, probably shouldn't say hard, but there was a lot of tweaking to get it to that clarity. It didn't naturally just drop out in the fermenter and end up looking like that.
Interesting. Did anyone else have to clarify their beer?
Similar to Jack, apologies for my lateness. I was just doing some mediation work with Jeremy and Dean, so apologies there. Same as Jack, it came out of fermenter much more turbid than what I was expecting. The chip malt in there probably largely did that, and then the Michigan yeast from Bluestone obviously contributed to it. We haven't filtered ours. We had a product called Findings in the conditioning tank, which I can't remember. Is it positively charged? And it attracts some of the particle matter within the conditioning tank, which then drops a sediment to the bottom. So we've added Findings to ours. It's not as clear as what Jack says. So that's probably a really nice little process point of the difference that a filtration component can actually make.
Glenn and I, Glenn's here. He was my co-brewer, so I'm a home brewer, and we brewed it in my backyard, and we forgot to put the whirl flock in at the end of the boil, which probably didn't help. So a lot of it come out looking like mud, especially the ones at the bottom of the keg, which I think this was poured from at the first ones. Some of the other ones coming out look a little bit brighter, which is good. But yeah, other than that, we didn't do anything. I did cold crash it, hoping that there'd be some dropout, but it wasn't a lot of dropout when we kegged it. So. It is what it is. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's not a bad thing, is it? Like, it's still a good beer, so it doesn't change anything. It just looks different. Can you touch on quickly? Sorry, I know you put the mic down, but you mentioned cold crash, and I know a lot of people probably know what cold crash is. But can you tell us a little bit more about that and what it actually does?
Yeah. So what I would typically do, it's not what every home brewer would do, but I would typically rack the beer into another fermenter to get it off the yeast cake, and usually that alone will make sediment drop out. But this time I also put it in the fridge and got it down to about close to 0 degrees for a few days, and that helps to stop the yeast activity and make things to fall out. But it was a pretty hazy beer. And yeah, as what's your name? Will. As Will said, that's part of that's a function of the yeast, which I thought was a great yeast too, by the way. So.
Yeah, and the the yeast did change from the start of the recipe. So I think the recipe was first written with a different yeast type. The bright was added to the turbidity, and then the yeast type changed. So that definitely could have had an impact on why the brightness was a bit more of a different point, I guess, across the beers.
Yeah.
JJ, Sarah, we haven't heard from you about your beers, which are both bright, so probably not much to add.
Yeah, we had a different process. So we did add wellflock in the boil to help with that. And after the fermentation, we cold crushed for 4 days and then put it into a bright tank. So we pulled it off the fermenter into the bright tank and let it sit there for another 8 days. So rather than filtering or anything, we just used time and temperature to let it settle.
Did yours come off the fermenter into bright, or was it hazy at that stage and brightened up?
Still fairly hazy, and it brightened up through the bright tank.
So I had a similar process in the Brewhouse to what Sarah and Tassie have explained, in adding wellflock, probably similar fermentation, but yeah, mine came out when I racked it from fermented to bright, pretty good, like almost spot on, and a little bit of time in bright tank cleared it up. As to why that happened and why mine was different from everyone else's, geez, it's kind of hard to say. Like,
Bit of magic.
Doing the same process, same brew house again, I'd have more of an idea, but yeah, I don't know, the differences in the boil. I had a good chunk of bitterness and IBUs in the kettle, which does help precipitate out proteins. That's what I originally thought, talking to Jack on the way through, and knew his was hazy. But yeah, stoked it dropped right. I didn't have to do any of the extra work at the end.
Yeah, interesting. I wonder what caused that, but it would be really cool. Maybe next year we can get all 5 brewers to brew on the same brew house and the same fermenter and see what happens.
I think one of the more strange things was like our beer saw 2.5 weeks at -1 and it was still proper hazy. Like you could have served it as a hazy pale. So to the point where JJ and I were taking photos of the beers, sending to each other, being like, "Am I tripping?" Or like his was bright and mine was super hazy. That was before findings went in, and we also used a brew bright product in the boil. So the recipes are all everyone's percentages were slightly different, but not massively to get their brew house to work. So it was very interesting how that variant changed. One thing we did talk about was we were all shipped the yeast as liquid yeast from Bluestone, really good high quality yeast, but we're all shipped in the volumes that we needed to pitch, so they're direct pitch quantities. I don't know, without checking the serial numbers and asking Bluestone, potentially they came from different batches, and there might be a little bit of haze variation there from a yeast strain perspective. Obviously, a yeast supplier's, any raw material supplier is going to tell you that their product is always the same, but in reality, even grain, everything, hops, IBUs change, alpha acid changes, everything has a slight variance. So maybe we were using some different generations of the strains depending on what pack size we were sent.
So I should say, feel free to taste them all. There's no specific order that we're going by. So we're going to taste them all and we'll discuss all aspects of the beer as we go. But carbonation is the next point of discussion. So this is something that you have some control over, and I guess you're trying to match the style of beer, but how did you choose what kind of carbonation, or can you describe like what your target carbonation is in the style of beer? Somebody.
And did you all have the same? That's what I want to know. This is a stat I didn't get.
This is something that was, I know we were given 2.5 volumes, I think, as a... No?
You were given nothing. No, that was 2.5 grams per litre.
This is where potentially having a stylistic profile in which to brew off might have benefited us with what we were going to shoot for from a carbonation point of view. I know for me, we're carbonating through a little carbonation stone in conditioning tank, and I've set it to 2.5 volumes of CO2. Bear in mind that I've kegged it off this morning. It's travelled down 2 hours and then hopefully been in cool room for a couple of hours this afternoon. So whether or not that tertiary process at the end of it has put more or shaken a little bit out of it. It depends a little bit on your dispense system too, how it actually shows up. So for us, or for me, it was targeting 2.5 volumes of CO2.
Cool. Any variation on that?
I was a similar target. Mine was about 5.1 grams per litre, which is maybe a little bit under 2.5 volumes. It's a little bit less than double is the conversion. The thing that I did differently is I try to catch the last Play-Doh of gravity and lock the tank in to do a bit of natural carbonation at the end. Also to dry hop at that point just before I lock the tank in to try and catch any dry hop aroma that would bubble off. And I usually get it pretty close and touch up a bit with the carb stone. But yeah, like similar target. I guess most people are probably targeting similar points for a pale ale.
Yeah, we carbonated ours a little bit higher because we cartridge filter post fizz, so between the fermenter, which at the little brew pub they're uni tanks. We don't have bright tanks down there, which we do in the big brewery. We just go straight from the fermenter into keg. So we carbonate a little bit higher, like 2.6, 2.65 if I'm going to filter, because it passes through a cartridge filter, and you do lose a little bit of carbonation, I find, between the fermenter and the keg. So sort of that 2.55 zone was what I was shooting for.
And Jerry, is this something that's harder to control on a homebrew scale, or?
No, nothing like that. I'm not a very patient man, and so here's how it happens at my place. So we put the beer in the keg, and depending on how much headspace there is, like how much room there is, like where the beer finishes up. If you got very little headspace, and I carbonate my beers this way all the time. So I use 19 litre. They're called corny kegs. They're just sort of like used to be used for post mixing, like fizzy cordial, I suppose. So you put the beer in the keg, and you put the lid on. Then all my beers I do the same way. I put 40 psi of pressure onto it, and then with the keg upright. I mean, I put it in the fridge first, so it's cold. To get out of the fridge, clip the gas onto it, 40 psi, and I just shake it, or rock it really, upright. You don't want to put it on the sideways because the beer will come out the gas line and go into and make a real mess. So you just upright, just rock for about a minute or two, and that's it. And it's carbonated. So you stick it in the fridge and then let it settle down. And the more headspace, the less time you have to rock it. That's all. But no more than 2 minutes. And I don't know how many volumes that is, but it works. Works every time, and it doesn't take long.
Now the test will be to see if any of these brewers can pick what it is. A question up there. Great.
Great discussion so far, thank you. I didn't want to ask this, but then I've got a bit of Dutch courage. I've got a really bad short-term memory, and I'm struggling to follow which brewers from which brewery, and I was wondering if you're okay with rearranging so that you match the things on the table.
It's not a bad idea.
Yeah, fair enough.
You want us to do that, or you can tell us where to go?
We've got Moo Brew, Van Dieman, King Island, Hopfields, and then my favourite.
Yeah, you got to take the beers. That's the tricky thing.
Post-COVID.
Where do you want me?
Yeah, you come closer to us, Jerry.
I think everyone really appreciates
Yeah.
that, so thank you.
It's really the only wheel that moves. It's a good suggestion. We should have thought of that to start with. Sorry. And not everyone's wearing their tops. Come on, guys. Self-promotion. All right, while we're doing that, I'm going to change the slide, and I'm going to put up my first graph. So, Oh no, okay. We're not really going to talk about this one, but this is another graph. This might be just a little side note. This is the ABV difference between the 5 beers. So the recipe said 5.1 to 5.2. Jerry, I think yours is the only one that's a bit above, but you do have some points on this. I think yours ended about 5.8. Can you tell us a bit about why that happened?
Well, it wasn't intentional, put it that way. So I got this grain, and it probably was a little bit more grain than I thought I was going to get, but I thought I'll just use it all. And I didn't really have many options because it was all in one bag, which is my fault, I guess. But because when I came and picked it up, I said I'll just throw it all in one bag. So I thought, oh well, it's in the right proportions. So I ended up making. I was planning to make about 55 litres of beer, but when I crushed the grain and I did 2 mashes with my system at home. So one was overnight and then the other one in the morning after I got through the first one. And anyway, the efficiency I got out of that grain was a lot more than I expected. And so I ended up making like 80 litres of beer instead of like 55 litres of beer. And it was still way over the gravity, and I was actually pouring cold water into it at the end just to get the gravity down to something I thought might be sort of half acceptable to, what this is meant to be. And so that's what happened, and just how it happened on the day. And I had Glenn there, and we were sort of, it was a bit of like oh shit, which is how a lot of my brew days can go. And that's home brewing's a lot of fun. So
yeah, well, I mean,
if you like a bit of chaos, it's good.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a bad thing. It's just you have less control when those things happen. I mean, what else could you have done? So, yeah, I just wanted to highlight that because it was a really interesting point that you found that the malt was more efficient and, you were getting high yield than you expected.
Yeah. Great product. It was a really good product, I thought.
Yeah, plug for Voyager.
Yeah.
All right, this is the graph I thought I was going to. This is the malt bill of the 5 different breweries. And they're basically all the same. But there is a little green little green touch on both Moo Brews and Hobart Brewers. Something called acid malt. You're not going to trip, don't worry. It is to do with the pH of the beers, which leads to a nice little discussion about pH. So, Jack, maybe because Jerry just chatted, why did you add acid malt?
Sure. Cheating. We in all our breweries, we use acidulated malt. We essentially treat it as a brewing aid, so you don't get any extract. There's no sugar in acidulated malt. It's a bit of an potentially old school way to do it, but pH is a huge subject, so I don't want to waffle on for ages. But essentially, when you mix your grain with water, which we call mashing in, sorry to dumb this down, most of you in the room probably understand a lot of this, but there's a bunch of chemical reactions that happen depending on your water chemistry, depending on your water composition that you're targeting. You might be putting brewing salts in the mash. There's a heap of things that happen, and essentially there's an optimum pH range that you want to reach. Some of it's related to, the most important part essentially is enzyme activation, so I'm going to get a little bit crunchy here, but essentially you want to get sugar out of the malt or your grist that you're mixing around in your brew house for the yeast to consume it to turn it into an alcoholic beverage. There's optimum pH zones for the natural enzymes in your grist to activate. So you really want to target those. It's essentially like no point mixing a bunch of stuff together and only getting 60% efficiency. You really want to maximise what you've got in the mash tun. So that sort of sets up your pH target. The other one is your final product. So you can't start the process and be like, oh, my pH, let's say optimum pH. I mean, this is personal preference and everyone's brew is different, but let's say anywhere from 5.1 to 5.5 would be a normal pH range. If you want your beer to come out the brew house at that target, you can't come in at 6 or 7 pH in the mash tun. So it sort of sets up your brew day as well. Long-winded way of saying, to get to that point, you can do a heap of different things. The easier, more simple probably way to do it is to tip some lactic acid or phosphoric acid into the mash, which is a great, super simple, really clean way of doing it. I've always really liked brewing with acidulated malt purely because the percentages in my head, I just know if you use X% with our water chemistry, and it's different for both breweries, but I can get it in a zone without then having to crunch numbers and how many mils of phosphoric acid. The other probably bigger benefit for me in the little brew house is the mash tun's so small, we can probably fit 150 kilos of grain in there, but you have to mix it by hand with a paddle, which maybe some people are like, oh, that's not that bad. But when you have a big mash, it's a lot of work and it's hard. The big brew is easy because it's huge. You can put 1.5 tons, maybe not quite, 1.2 tons in there, but it has mash paddles that spin it around, so it's easier to mix acid in and get it nice and uniform, whereas if you just mash it in from the start with acidulated malt, it's a uniform off the bat, you know where you start. If you under or overshoot, it's a little bit harder to adjust, you can, but if you undershoot it, you can also then give it a little bit of a top up with some phos acid or lactic acid. So that's how we use acidulated malt. I treat it like a brewing aid. I don't consider it as part of the grist from an extract perspective. It's purely pH. Doesn't get you to the end result. We still do a lot of water treatment with brewing salts, but it puts you in the zone without having to go really hard on the brewing salts to get your pH to where you want. So it's like it's essentially a buffer, pardon the pun.
Yeah, a great pun. Jerry, do you have anything to add? Because you use acidulated malt as well.
Yeah, I use acidulated malt. I have got a pH meter, but to be honest with you, I'd rather just use acidulated malt. So I don't want to have to. I mean, I could use the phosphoric acid, but I never got round to doing it. So acidulated malt costs a little bit more than the acid, but it's for convenience. I just find it's very convenient, so I just use it. I know it. You don't need to use it on your dark beers, so like on stouts, the dark grains will adjust the pH for you. Fine, so it's only on the pale beers that you need to use it, and yeah, I always do. Yep. Yeah,
cool. So you don't know what pH you have or what you're starting with, and you're just using it because you know that you get a better end product when you do.
Yeah, I just following Gladfields, that they give you guidelines as to what to put into your so I tend to use, any acidulated malt's pretty much the same, but I tend to use the Gladfields product, and it gives a good result. So yeah, happy with it.
Yeah,
and
cool.
Yep.
Anyone else? Anyone else play with pH? Sarah?
I say we didn't play with our pH.
Cool.
So it was a conscious decision. So we use rainwater, so our pH is naturally that little bit lower anyway, and we don't tend to use the acids anyway. If we are changing a pH, for us it is with the acidulated malt. And as that wasn't in our description, we decided we would leave it out for now, and our pH did go a little bit higher than some of the other breweries on this. So
yeah, cool. Yeah, I don't think I even got your pH in the end. I don't know.
5.5.
Okay. I can't think of what the other ones were, but yeah, interesting that rainwater is lower though.
Yeah, for us it is.
Yeah, cool. JJ.
So I had a really similar result to Sarah. Didn't use acidulated malt and have used some mash salts to try and hit that 5.2 to 5.4 set point. I do my brew day here at Shambles and then transfer the unfermented wort into a stainless IBC cube to take down the channel to Hopfields to ferment.
Which I find it so cool that you can actually do that. It just seems outrageous, but yeah. Sorry, keep going.
It's nice. For a lot of the week when Hopfields isn't open, they're running around in the brewery by myself, so it's nice to see the Shambles guys here and come in and use their brew house. So for this batch, I did a really low volume, 400 litres, where their brew house is designed for 12. And that's the first time I've done this low a volume. So the strike volume of water was 300 litres, and putting in about 100 litres of water to get it below the false bottom in the mash. And normally in a 1,200 litre brew, that percentage is insignificant, but over 300 litres, it was enough to bring the pH up to 5.5, or at least that's what I assumed that it was. So I got stuck with a high mash pH on brew day and added some lactic to bring that back down to get good conversion and, yeah, the right ABV that we were shooting for. I like doing both. Lactic's a nice, easy thing to get you out of trouble.
Will.
We didn't touch pH. We're perfect. We're pretty consistent with our water, and pretty much all our mashes are 5.25 to 5.3 pH. And for this, I am effectively the control in the experiment, somewhat ironically. I didn't adjust it.
Yeah, Evandale air and water. It's perfect, isn't it? Kelsey, do you want to ask the next question about IBUs, and I'll bring up my next graph.
Yeah, so I think we're moving on to where these beers vary the most in terms of sensory. So the hops and what the hops are contributing, and IBUs. So that's the International Bitterness Units. So despite being given all the same ingredients and recipe, we've got some big differences in bitterness and IBUs in these beers. I'm sure you have picked up on that. We'd love to discuss why this can happen and what different decisions maybe went into the target bitterness and what the result was here.
Anyone want to start? Okay. Yeah, thanks, Joe.
So I can't see the graph, but I'm pretty sure mine might stick out like a sore thumb.
I can kind of show
Just
you, but
here.
it's pretty small. Sorry. Yours is the middle one. No,
Third?
yours is the second left.
Yeah, cool. So highest IBUs. Yeah,
Yep.
and that kind of checks out with what I'm tasting. So that was a mistake on brew day. And I can go through how I've made that mistake and some calculations. What happened was the small batch volume that I was going for in the first time I've done it in 400 litres, and using a calculator in the spreadsheet without realising that the batch volume was locked in. So what I've done for the Flex Edition was a plan of targeting 10 IBUs to get low bitterness from that, and tried to maximise the Whirlpool hops and get flavour out of it. The mistake that I made of not converting the batch volume from 1,200 down to 400 litres has given me 3 times as much bitterness on the Flex Edition. It wasn't what I intended. I'm still happy with how the beer came out.
Yeah.
The bitterness lingers, but it's not a harsh bitterness.
Yeah, I'm quite honestly, I was quite amazed by how well it's come out, considering how worried you were as well when we had a conversation about it. Like, the bitterness it's quite smooth, considering.
That might be a question. Phil's going to hate me for this, but that might be a question for Phil from Hop Products Australia, if he's still here, around Flex and the product and what it is, and also from it provides a really soft bitterness. I'm sure other people have used flowables or extract products in the room, but they can get really metallic and really grippy and quite abrasive if you deal them a heavy hand. Whereas, and when I saw the spreadsheet come through and I saw Jay's, I was like, "Whoa, that'll be interesting." But it is really soft. I don't know. Is Phil still
Is
here?
Phil there? And can we get Phil a microphone?
He's hiding. He's like, "Screw you."
So Phil is the Tasmanian sales rep for HBA. Is that correct?
Correct, yeah, Tasmania and Victoria. And that feedback on Flex is quite consistent from people that use it a lot. It's really clean bitterness. So it's one of those products that lots of our customers, once they try it once, generally will keep using in some capacity. Some will use it in all their beers, and others will save it for maybe their bigger IPAs where they're trying to get the palate load down on the hot side to capture a little bit more wort into once brewers try it, they'll generally keep using it.
Do you want to, another little shameless plug here for HPA, but do you want to just give us a rundown about why there's benefits in using them versus tipping pellets into a brew house?
Yield is king, and brewers are struggling right now. So the more kegs you can get out or pack beer at the end of your process, the better. So generally, you're assuming at least 10 litres of loss per kilo of pellets that you put in, just through absorption, and that's not even really taking into account like engineering factors with the way whirlpools are designed. Some kettles just can't handle big loads of hops on the hot side without the risk of pulling a lot of TRUD, so precipitated proteins and hot matter into the fermenter, which is definitely something that you're trying to avoid. So yeah, it can help solve engineering problems as well as just increasing yield. So we say that the average yield gain from using Flex is 3 to 4%, which basically the Flex then pays for itself. Free bittering, yay.
And like I said before, Flex has featured, was it 3 years ago? Yeah, it would have been when Deep South were here. Flex used it with Shambles as a collab when Deep South first opened. And we do have a video on our YouTube, so if you'd like to see what it looks like, there's a video of it pouring out. It's just this liquid gold. But please don't taste it, because that's all you'll taste for a week.
Very sticky.
Very.
Just while we're on liquid hop products and Flex, is this the first time any of you have used it? Yes, Sarah?
Yep.
And
No, we use it a little bit
use it a lot
in the
yeah.
brew pub.
I've used it for quite a while. Yeah, really like it for good clean bitterness. Yeah, it's awesome.
Sarah, Will, first time? Jerry?
Yeah, I've never used it before. I was a bit perplexed about how to use it, but having used it once, I've still got plenty left. I reckon there's enough there for about 10 years. It was in like a tiny little container like this, little square thing, but I'd definitely keep using it, yeah.
It is quite remarkable the amount you all used. I think the most that was used was maybe Will, and that was like 130 or something. Why did you use 130 grams?
Good question. It's probably first time I'd used it, and I had a chat with Cornell from Shambles this afternoon, and we probably agreed that over the course of a 12-hect batch for me, we're probably picking up the best part of another 2 kegs worth of finished product, which we could obviously push out into the market. So that in itself will make me continue to use it for that. Why did we use 140 in it? Because I hadn't used it before, and curiosity will always get the better of me. So there was a nice amount of it there. So it was a case of, well, let's see what this can do. And I think both in ours and in JJ's, it's sort of, whilst it's gone high in bitterness, it's handled itself really well. So credit to it.
It would have been really interesting to see if someone did the same IBUs, but not with Flex, but with just Whirlpool hops. So just like pellets. It would have been interesting to see the difference. Sarah, is this the first time you've used it as well?
Yeah. It was fun to use. It's beautiful smell, and as you're using it.
Yeah, just don't taste it.
Don't taste it.
JJ, sorry.
I was going to say it will just carry over a lot more astringency, a lot more of that cellulose matter from the hops. They do a good job of separating out what you don't want and keeping what you do.
We got a question.
Hello. So I just wanted to ask, does anyone actually test their IBUs? Like, this is all calculated and perceived, but maybe Jack, like once a year or something, not necessarily this brew, but any of your brews.
Nah, so this is interesting because everyone knows how to crunch numbers, whether you're using a brewing software. I mean, we do all our equations by hand because we're old school, and I like to be able to look at all the brewers' brew sheets and see how they've got to what they've got to. But they're also it's just simple maths, right? Like the parts per million isoalpha acid per litre of beer. So there's a couple of different equations you can use, but it's pretty basic. when you punch it into a spreadsheet or a brewing software package, it gives you the same result as if you just put it into a calculator. The key thing, no matter how you're running your equation, is your utilisation rate. Essentially, to work out utilisation rate, you need to work out how efficient your brewhouse is in converting alpha acids, which is the bittering compound in a hop, into isoalpha acids, which is what gives you that bitterness, back of the tongue characteristic that you're sensing when you're drinking a beer. Textbooks will tell you in the kettle it's about 30%, and in the whirlpool, depending on the temperature. Now people are doing lower temperature well hopping, which 100%. Again, pardon the pun, not intended, but that changes your utilisation percentage rate. But if it's a hot whirlpool, anywhere from 95 to 100 degrees, we're in that like 3 to 5.5% range. So everyone's brewhouse is different depending on how many vessels, what temperature it gets when you put the hops in, how you cool your wort down. We don't send them off to a lab. Primarily, I mean, we turned 20 years, Moo Brew turns 20 years this year, and we're really happy with the way we calculate our beers. I'm sure if I sent them to the lab, they wouldn't be the BUs that I tell the website says our beers are, but I would not want to change them. So our utilisation rates are set to what they were when the original head brewer built the brew house. Funnily enough, they almost mirror what the textbook tells you they are, so I would guarantee they're not. The interesting thing is, since building the brew pub a couple of years ago and transferring recipes, we only brew limited one-off release beers at the brew pub, so we don't brew a pale ale at the big brewery and a pale ale at the little brewery and try and make them taste the same, but we do see a different utilisation rate. I don't change our equations to match that, but I change the way we use hops on the hot side to account for things not being too bitter or too grippy or too astringent. It would be quite easy to do. You only need a mass spec. I mean, Cascade have a lab that could test it for you. You could send it away and work out what your utilisation is and then change your equations. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure in homebrewing everything runs at 100% because your volume and your evaporation rate is so small in comparative sense. I'm pretty sure all the brewing software runs at 100% utilisation, and the differences are tiny. Like, we're talking half a BU and BU here and half a BU there, whereas when you're dealing with larger brewery sizes, like some of the other ones, that there is a significant difference there. But again, it depends on when you put your hops in, how hard you boil them, are you putting at start of boil, end of boil, all that sort of stuff. So we don't test them.
That gives me a good time to say a disclaimer about this graph. It is all calculations, and it's all, some of it is my calculations too, which cannot be trusted. So don't trust this, but it is pretty accurate in terms of the bitterness, I think, as well. We were hoping to get it tested, all 5 beers, but we didn't end up getting there in the end. But it would have been really interesting to see what we thought the IBUs were compared to what the IBUs were actually in real life. But it's also, you know, does anyone actually buy a beer based on the IBUs? Does anyone look at the IBUs and go, oh yeah, I'm really feeling 40 IBUs tonight? So, yeah, I don't know if it matters that much.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to say is we're aiming to brew a beer for a flavour profile, not to hit the numbers. The numbers are kind of a reference point to make it repeatable. But ultimately, if our calculators say one thing and the beer tastes like and has the flavour profile that we want, we're going to use the numbers as a reference point and keep making it taste the way we want to.
Yeah, I think that's key with anything. Obviously, brewing is very science driven, but ultimately the brew team or the brewer has essentially the final say in how the beer comes out of the brew house and into the fermenter. And if they're targeting something because they want it to taste like that, it doesn't really matter what the numbers say at the end of the day. If you're happy with your product and you know how to repeat it and you follow the same process again and again, that's all that really matters. So we get hung up on numbers quite a lot in the big brewery, purely because we want the beers to taste the same every time they come out. But if we're brewing a limited release beer and we put a 30 BU target on it, I don't really care if it's 60 or 25, as long as I'm happy with how it tastes at the end of the day.
And I think also, like, to touch on your point again, JJ, about your accident with the flex, if you weren't in this experiment and you did that, no one would bat an eye. Like, we wouldn't even think about it. Like, it would just be like, okay, because this beer is delicious. That's the main thing that matters at the end of the day, isn't it? So,
yeah, yes and no, and a bit of my ego for not intentionally doing it. But yeah, really happy with how it tastes at the end.
So Flex wasn't the only hops that were hop products or hops that were added to the beers. There was also Whirlpool hops that we specified to be Eclipse and Vic's Secret. So if anyone wants to talk about their decisions about knowing they've added Flex already, what kind of Whirlpool hop additions you decided to do in terms of how much and the ratio of each?
So I'll just jump in, and again, there's probably people in the room that understand all of this, but there is a huge difference between when you're putting hops or hop products, extract, whatever, in the kettle versus in the Whirlpool. We talk about two different hopping stages. We're talking about using Flex on the hot side, particularly hot being in the kettle when the beer is boiling. So we're primarily driving bitterness units where you get that characteristic on the back of your palate. The Eclipse and the Vic in the Whirlpool, although it's still warm, and I think I saw on the graph there were people whirlpooling at different temperatures, which will extract different characteristics from the hops. But we are driving bitterness units, so you get bitterness units out of that. But if you think about that 30% on the boil side down to that 5.5% in the Whirlpool, you get much less bitterness units out of the Whirlpool hop additions. One, because you don't put them on a rolling boil for an extended amount of time, so you don't isomerize those alpha acids. But you also get all the good things that some people like in beer, particularly when we're brewing a hop-forward beer. You're getting those aromatics, you're getting the fruit characteristics, you're getting the mandarins, the pineapples, as well as some bitterness. So that's probably just stepping it back a notch, that's probably the basic part of how we were all designing our recipes, because we were given a minimum of 10 BUs on the hot in the kettle for bittering units, and then we were kind of let loose to do whatever we wanted to reach that rough 30 target.
Yeah, I think you're the only one that used a different ratio, Jack, of Vic Secret versus Eclipse. Why'd you do that?
We use Vic Secret in the big brewery in reasonable amounts, but we have some challenges. Sorry, Hop Products Australia. We love the hop. It's an amazing aromatic, pungent. Like when you smell it in the bag when it's fresh, it's probably my favourite smelling hop. But we do find when you're using it on the hot side, not so much on the cold side, cold being either in the fermenter or post-firm hopping. If you use it on the hot side, we tend, and this again, it's brewery specific and water chemistry and pH. Not everyone sees this, but we tend to get a bit of this back-end grippiness from it. And I keep saying back-end, but if you think about, if you suck a tea bag on your tongue, you feel it at the very back at the base of your tongue, and that's the tannins and the polyphenols and all the things in the tea bag that's making your tongue sort of pucker. We get that from Vic Secret on the hot side, so we tend to lean away from Vic on the hot side, even though it's in the Whirlpool, it's still hot, and we use it a lot more for dry hopping, so cooler temperatures, and I just followed my gut feel for percentages of Vic on the hot side versus what we're going to tip in the tank for dry hop.
Yeah, it's super interesting, and I remember you mentioned that when we were trying the beers, because we didn't get to try the beers till 5 o'clock today or something, and you mentioned that, and I was like, oh, I never really got that from Vic Secret. So I wonder if it's also like a genetic thing as well, to terms with individuals.
Yeah, I mean, could be. Everyone's palate is totally different. So what I interpret as butterscotch or wet carpet, someone else might say strawberries or cat. You know, it doesn't mean it's wrong. It's just joining the neural pathways. So when you smell cat, you know that means X, and when I smell wet carpet, I know it means this. The end result, the chemical precursor is the same, but how you interpret is totally different. So it's not, everyone's palate is totally different. Will and I will sit on a judging table doing beer awards judging, and our comments will be either exactly the same or polar opposites. You're never like, oh, it's a bit of this or a bit of that. Everyone interprets things differently, but the end result is X, Y, Z. Maybe it is just a me thing. I think from the brewing team, I know a lot of our brewers, and Andy's here tonight too, but we experience the same thing, but it is beer dependent too. And the less malt backbone, the less crystal malt, the less sweetness you have in the beer, the more prominent we find we get that. Given this is an Aussie pale, it has a little bit of biscuit malt in it, but it is a very lean malt backbone. If it was a dark ale or a black IPA or something, you'd be less concerned about it.
Yeah, cool. And in Whirlpool temperature, like we mentioned, different temperatures for a Whirlpool. Sarah, you guys had a slightly higher whirlpool temperature than the other people.
Yeah.
But we chatted
so
about beforehand. Do you want to tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, so the way our kit's designed, we don't have the ability to cool our whirlpool. So these guys, I think, brought it down to 80 degrees before they added their hops in for the whirlpool, where ours was still up in the low 90s, 95, I think down to 93 during that whirlpool period. So we will get more bitterness and probably a less of the volatiles that other people got out of those hops.
Yeah, and I think you can taste that too. There is a different bitterness, and it's still a pleasant bitterness, but it is a different bitterness to what the bitterness we get from Van Dieman and Hopfields from the flex.
We've still got the flex in there, but we've got those tones of the other hop bitterness on top.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting comparison. So Moo Brew versus King Island, you'll see in the graph they have pretty much identical IBUs in terms of the makeup of the different hop additions, but they definitely have a different taste on the palate. So these little differences in things like temperature can really make a big difference, even though they're using the exact same hop ratios.
I should say also, if we actually got testing, there probably would be a difference in the IBUs, but it's because I calculated this with Excel, and so it's probably my fault that there's not a difference in IBUs between the two beers, but I reckon there would be a difference if we sent it to the lab.
100% would be. Primarily because the equations we use aren't right, because I've never certified them against lab testing. So they wouldn't stack up. But I mean, the other reason, yes, we love Big Secret, but Eclipse is a newer Hop Products Australia hop, a big aromatic, throws a lot of... It's interesting because when I first wrote the tasting notes and sent them to Matt when I kegged this beer yesterday, it was more citrus, more mandarin, really sweet orange characteristics. Now it's sat here and warmed up. It's a bit more softer peach stone fruit, so it's definitely changed a little bit, but it's also a hop that we don't use at all in the big production brewery, so I was way more excited to throw more of that in there than I was Vic, and it's probably also, again, there wasn't a scientific reason behind it. It was just like, it smells great and I know it's a good hop, so I want to use it.
That's maybe a quick little side note, because you've made me think of it. Why does beer change as it changes temperature, like in terms of taste? Anyone know? Will, why are you so upset by that question?
It's a bit of an open-ended question. I mean, carbonation is a huge thing, and the longer a beer sits there, the more carbonation it loses. Carbonation really lifts aromatics, lifts the palate. It changes the way you interpret the hop oils when you stick your nose in there. There's a bunch of other things that happen from a malt perspective when the beer warms up that changes. The other thing that is a bit of a just something to think about is how everyone's sensory palate works. The more you smell something, the more you taste something, the more you get adjusted to it. So if you do a few little drive-bys where you run it past your nose like that versus sticking your nose right in there and taking a big whiff, your palate will adjust to how you're smelling it. So we bang on about beers warming up and not tasting that good, etc., etc. The percentage change is probably quite small, but what you're interpreting and how you're imagining it from what it tasted and smelt like at -1 out of the fermenter versus 5 degrees when it's been sitting here for an hour is probably minimal, but it's enough for you to think about it.
I can guarantee you that the first sip out of all your glasses will be very different to the last sip. Whilst it is that small percentage, your perception, as Jack says, the palate changes, the beer in the glass changes. It's very much, beer is very expressive, similar to us as individuals. Cold winter's night in Hobart, we all got jackets, we rug up, we're not doing a whole heap with ourselves, we're sitting down. Warm summer evening in the middle of summer, we've got shorts, t-shirt, thongs on and stuff. We're far more open, flowing, expressive. It's exactly the same with the beers in your glass. They show much more when they become warmer, and sometimes, particularly in bigger alcoholic or darker styles beers, it can actually be a positive attribute to have them, or that's why stouts are generally served a little bit warmer than something like an IPA or a pale ale, because they show much more character at those warmer temperatures.
That was such a good analogy, Will. My goodness.
Question over here.
Is that on?
Is it on? Try again.
How do you actually test for bitterness? Like, we all know what bitterness tastes like, but how do you actually come up with a metric for that?
It's a lab-based test, a mass spectrometer. They measure the amount of isoalpha acids, which are the bitterness units in the liquid, and they give you a reading. They spit it out the other end. So to test it, to give an actual result, you got to send it off to an analytic lab. Per pallet, you get a bit of what's the right word? A cellar pallet. You start to learn what you think might be 30 BUs is 30 BUs. If you drink a beer that's supposed to be 90 and you can't taste anything for the next 20 minutes, it's probably 90. So, but from a data scientific perspective, it's purely just measuring the amount of a compound in the liquid, and it spits a number out the other end.
We've got another question.
Thank you. I've got a question back on the temperature front. So, temperature at the ferment and duration of the ferment. Can you comment on the importance of that, or more to the point, the variability between each of you about the temperature of the ferment and duration thereof?
I can say something. The most important things in brewing, well, the first most important thing is cleanliness. If you haven't got that, you're going to be in trouble. And the next most important thing is the controlling the fermentation temperature. It's got to be within the range that yeast operates at. So, and we have done experiments at the Homebrew Club as an example, where we've taken a yeast and we've brewed the same beer at different temperatures, and then we've all sort of had a bit of a test runner, and with the yeast that we did use, we found that we got a better result if we stayed in the lower end of the range for that yeast, and it was a nicer beer. And so temperature control is absolutely key for brewing good beers. If the temperature goes too high, you're gonna get off flavours thrown out of your beers, and you'll know it. If it's too low, it'll just put the yeast to sleep, and it might not wake up.
I think a really interesting point too is that higher temperatures are actually better for the yeast in terms of growth, but it's just worse for us in terms of flavour. Yeah. So they'll do better, they'll be happier for a shorter amount of time, but they will produce some pretty terrible flavours in that process.
There are yeasts that operates at really high temperatures. So there's Kvake yeast, which I've never used, but you know that
we almost used it in this
crazy,
beer.
Crazy
If we got away with it, we would have used it in this beer, but it didn't get passed. Anyone else want to comment on fermentation temperature before we have a quick break?
I think to use an example of when temperature goes too high, something like a saison or a wild ale, you're allowed to get to, look, sometimes we've done beers at 27, 28, 29 degrees for a saison to get that expressive yeast character into the beer. We've done whiskey wash in the past using an M1 yeast, a whiskey yeast, where rightly or wrongly the distillers don't really care what temperature you do it at, what the profile is, and it'll churn through something within 48, 72 hours at a temperature of above 30 degrees, and it genuinely smells like a liquid banana bread. It's that expressive in nature. Now, is that wrong? Obviously not from the distiller point of view, because they go back and make some pretty good product with that, but that gives you an example of using a different yeast at temperature. It can be really quite expressive. It's certainly probably not something I'd want to drink or would recommend to anyone else.
I don't know. Liquid banana bread sounds pretty good to me. All right, we might have a quick break. Go to the toilet, get another beer if you've got through your tasters yet. Choose a schooner of your choice. We'll be back here in about 10-ish minutes. That always extends, but we'll try and push it to make sure it's 10 minutes. And make sure you think of questions. Come back with questions. We've only got so many questions to ask. We need you to help us. Because I have heard from the audience that you do have some questions. You brought them up to me, but I'm not the right person to answer them. You've got to ask the brewers. So make sure you put your hand up and we can ask them. But to kick off, make sure you scan your QR code. Make sure you vote for your favourite, which one you prefer. That's the right language. But also make sure you leave your tasting notes. One more thing to really talk about, and one more of my fabulous graphs to show, and that is the dry hop. What is a dry hop? Into the mic, Will.
Right. So a dry hop is after you've got the beer fermenting. So with the yeast, you can add hops to the fermenter, and you can do that any time. But for my beer, I did 2 dry hops. One was when the fermentation was pretty active, so after a day or two, and then a couple of days after that, as the fermentation was starting to tail off, I put in some there. And it's meant to give you different characteristics at the different times that you do it. That's how I describe it. And the reason you do it is if you want to get a lot of hop characteristics and that aromas and sort of fruity sort of flavours that we associate with a lot of the hops that the New World hops like grown in Australia and America and New Zealand. That's what you do it for, without adding too much bitterness, because when I brew, that's one of the things I'm sort of very aware of. I have brewed a lot of hoppy beers over the years, and the one thing that the beers I don't like are the ones where the bitterness is too overwhelming and it takes everything away from all the nice, pleasant things you can get out of hops. And hops are expensive, so you don't want to. You want to make it. You're going to spend money on making a hoppy beer. You want to make it be good beer, otherwise, it just gets tipped down the drain. That's for me.
Thank you, Joe. It's a really great explanation, and you can see in your, as you said, you had 2 dry hop additions, and as you can see on my very fancy graph, that the Hobart Brewers is that orange kind of dotty line, and you can see those 2 steps, which is the 2 different additions. So addition on, I think it's the 2nd day, and then another one on the 3rd day. You also had the highest dry hopping rate, which I think is quite obvious in the beer as well. It's the fruitiest of the beers.
Yeah, I think that was my fault. I got everything's my fault.
Well, you did brew it, so I mean, you've got to take responsibility.
I got given the hops, so I thought, and I didn't read the instructions. I used all the hops I got, and maybe I shouldn't have done that. I don't think. I know that now. But
well, it worked out just for adding everything you got. Like, it did work out. It's a good beer.
All the grain, all the hops, they all went in.
So there is some difference, I guess. Some people double dry hopped, which means 2 additions on different days. Some people single dry hopped. What triggered that response? Some people dry hopped earlier, later. What's your reasons?
I like to think of it as like, I guess, steeping a tea bag. And if you're doing it earlier and warmer, I don't tip the kettle straight on the tea bag at 100 degrees as soon as it's boiled, because it brings out too much astringency. It's the same, but to less effect, having it at 18 degrees. If you do add a massive hop load at 18 degrees, you can get some astringency out of it. So there's some negatives in that, but there's also some positives in adding it early and getting some of those really nice volatiles and fruity flavours. I don't know how deep we want to go in talking about biotransformation and what the yeast can do to the hops as well. There's an extra little positive there that if you add the hops while the yeast is actively fermenting, it can kind of transform some of the hop flavours and kind of transform some like geranium and flavours that are a bit more floral into a bit more tropical fruits, which is always a positive. Well, depends on the beer style, but tropical flavours for me are where you want to go.
No, I mean, getting deep into biotransformation can be dangerous. And again, that is another thing that came up in a previous Beerable. Lindsay, in her first year, did a, if you know the snack queen that has, sorry, there's no snacks on your table. I shouldn't have brought her up, actually. But she couldn't taste the beers because they're in kegs. But she did biotransformation experiment 3-4 years ago as well. And it's a bit of magic, I think, that stuff as well. Bit of an unknown.
So I think looking at this graph of when people dry hopped in terms of days and the amount of hops they added, so all we specified was a dry hopping rate of 2.5 grams per litre, and they could decide how many times they dry hop, if they do it over multiple days or just straight or just one day. Having a look at these, I know the brewers can't see it, or maybe Will's got it there. Great.
Sort of, yeah.
Nice. The one that stands out the most to me is King Island, Sarah. So you dry hop much later than everyone else and just once. So you want to explain your choice doing that?
So we dry hopped just before the end of active ferment, so it still had it ticked down one gravity level, so yeah, it came down from 0.011 to 0.010, I think. So it was just, the yeast was tailing off, and we put it in then, so it had a little bit of active and then a bit of time just settling so I think we left it 4 days before we then cold crashed, and then it was as it settled out for the 4 days, and then we took the beer off, so it had 4 days in at 18 or a bit less. It would have cooled a little bit over that time as the yeast was less active, and then cooled it down to 2 degrees and let that settle out before we took it off the hops and into the bright tank.
For us, we did a dry hop at 2.5, 3 days, and then again at on the 6th day. Dry hopping can be, it's probably brewer preference is probably the biggest dictator, but also equipment plays the biggest part. For me, the reason that we did 2, I haven't used a heap of Vic Secret and Eclipse for quite some time, and so I was really curious to see how it occurred and wanted to, for want of a better word, hedge the bets. So we wanted an addition partway through primary ferment when the yeast is quite active and that biotransformation actually occurs quite rapidly, but then also to retain some of that hop character at the back end of fermentation. So hence the reason we've gone on day 3 and day 6, and knowing our tanks, the conical tanks that we do, we know that, and we're a brewery that hasn't historically done a heap of hoppy beers and is certainly not set up for that. So it's probably one of the reasons why we've done 2 dry hops for this beer as opposed to one single addition.
Anyone else want to add anything? Silence. Audience questions. I'm sure they exist. Oh, look at all the hands popping up everywhere. I think the mic's gone past, sorry.
Hey, Matt, this is probably a question for you. Is it just a stylistic choice on the graph that they're all at different levels around 2.5, or are they all meant to just be 2.5 at the end there?
No, they were all around, they were different. So
Okay.
2.65, 2.35, that kind of area. Again, my calculations.
Okay.
So I got 5 very different brew sheets because brewers are very different, it seems. Like Jax is covered in scribbles from his calculations. He does handwrite his calculations. Will's is very fancy, actually, for a farmhouse brewery. Like, very fancy.
Will's is beautiful.
So I was using a whole range of different sources, a lot of citizen data, I guess, to try and put this together.
Okay, it's pretty vibes-based.
But they are fairly accurate. I mean, yeah. I wish we had the legit data, but they are different. Yes, it's not.
First of all, thanks, guys, for a really nice discussion. I want to go back to what was mentioned before the break about banana bread. I'm from Germany, and there's a lot of Weissbier, wheat beer, and there's a certain type of beer called banana Weizen. And I'm just wondering why aren't there a lot of wheat beers in Australia or in Tasmania?
We're on stage with one of Tasmania's main producers of Hefeweizen.
There aren't a lot of them because people don't drink them. But they're one of our brew team's favourite type of beers. We had a core range Hef that we released for years and years and years. Hefeweizen, sorry, Will. And it doesn't sell. So we release it seasonally, once a year. We've actually skipped it this year, believe it or not, because...
You what?
We've skipped it this year. It's
You,
not
you
making
didn't
an-
even notice, Matt.
It's not making an appearance. I don't know. I think wheat became a bit of a dirty word in beers because there were some pretty challenging, probably not true to style, not great German wheat beers in the market that weren't so good and probably ruined the term wheat and beer for a lot of people. They're a lot. They're a big flavour bomb. There's the phenolic compounds that create the yeast esters and the phenolic compounds that create those banana and clove and spice characteristics are delicious, but if you're not really in tune with them or you're not expecting them and you think as an Australian palate and you're like, oh, I'll drink a wheat beer, that sounds fun, and you put it in your mouth and it tastes like a banana paddle pop, it's a pretty different experience. So, we love them and we still brew them at the brew pub when it's not around. The Hef's had a few little reiterations from Mackie Sally's, but yeah, the core range beer got dropped because it just wasn't selling.
I think those styles of beers have suffered from the popularity of hops. All the hoppy beers have superseded that. So we had a Belgian wheat beer in our core range for probably the first 5-8 years of us. Same as Jack, it just didn't move. It got superseded by pale ales, IPAs, double IPAs. As far as popularity, and it was just a style of beer or style collection of beers, wheat beers that just sat on a shelf. And I think if you go back 10 years, you'll speak to retailers and they will say the same thing. Wheat beers just sat on the shelf and did not move. Rightly or wrongly, they were superseded by a much more expressive hop style.
I think they sometimes can be quite divisive. It doesn't seem like that style has a middle ground. You either like it or you don't. Yeah, there's not that, oh, yeah, I kind of. Yeah.
Yeah, I absolutely love them, but I know people who absolutely hate them. So, yeah. But do it. Make sure you brew it again, Jack.
It's like anything, right? Like they're big flavours and big concepts, and if you're not brought up, it's a bit like my wife is from France, and I gave her Vegemite for the first time not long after we met, and she was like, what the fuck is that? Because it's not croissants, it's not like standard French breakfast, it's old yeast on toast. So, but now she eats it by the spoonful. So, it's what your palate's adjusted to, but they're big flavours and big aromas, and if you're not expecting that, it's a lot.
I saw a lot more hands in the audience. Do we have any more? Right at the back.
Yeah, thanks very much to everybody for this really awesome discussion. I'm really enjoying tasting the beers as each of you say something. I was curious because we're talking about the different hops that you use, and you mentioned various hop products, liquid hops as well as pellets, I think someone mentioned. I was curious if whole leaf hops play much of a role in your brewing process, and what are the sort of positive and negatives around using whole leaf?
I think two people probably have at least something to say here. Van Dieman and King Arm, but Will, you got your mic first.
We still, our system is set up for whole leaf, so we have some stainless mesh cages that we actually use to drop into the kettle to use effectively like a tea bag type effect in the brew. If you want to compare it really black and white to the Flex product from HBA, it is hands down HBA wins that over whole flowers any day of the week, just from an efficiency, from a flavour, from a bitterness, in every capacity you can think of. The only reason we use whole hops still in a certain number of brews is that we're obviously growing some of our hops at the brewery, so we're drying them. We don't have capacity to pelletise them or create a Flex product or do anything else with them, so they remain cryovac or dried and cryovac in a whole leaf form. And so obviously the only way we get to use those is in the baskets in a brew. Look, whole leaf flowers, HBA don't produce them anymore, do they? No, it's been surpassed. It's other than a wet hot brew or someone like myself that has the ability to grow them and use them, it's been surpassed. There's better ways to get flavour, bitterness, and aroma into beer with hops than whole leaf flowers.
Yeah, we do one brew a year with fresh hops. We found a couple of plants that are quite old on King Island. So we, once a year, pick foraged hops and use it, and it is a pain because they clog things up and they don't, everything, they just absorb more water and so it is a pain to use, but they do give a milder flavour that everyone enjoys when we do them. But so once a year is enough for us at the moment. But it's worth doing and people do enjoy it. But yes, it is a lot of a process to do.
Yeah, and Sarah, I love that story too, because that's why I mentioned you, because the hops grow on an old farm that just, have been untouched and just left to go wild for years and years and years, and then eventually there was a brewery, yourselves, formed so that you could actually use the hops. So can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so there's a early settler down on the bottom end of the island that was one of the original settlers there, and they must have, we're not sure exactly when they've been planted, but they've probably come over with those settlers as part of their garden crop that they brewed their own beer, but they've just been left wild in the tea tree scrub just below their house. So we've, when we started the brewery, the farmer from there came and told us they were there, and we thought, oh, really, hops on King Island? But we've every year since we've started, we went down there, and they do give quite a mild and almost honey flavour to them that we don't get out of any of the commercial hops that we use.
Do you know what variety they are?
No.
Okay.
We've
bush hops.
Yeah, quite an old bittering style.
Cluster maybe. Okay. Yeah. Audience, there was so many hands before. Surely there's more questions.
I have a question. And thank you very much for everybody for putting their beers out for scrutiny. I was wondering, did everybody achieve what they were aiming for in all the process and in how you did it? Is everybody stoked? Does anybody want another go? How do you all feel about what you aim to achieve and what you finally delivered?
What would you do differently, maybe?
For me, I'll say, probably. The simple answer is yes, because it allowed me to use something like Flex that I would not have normally gone and reached out to Phil and said, hey, mate, what's this? He gives me the sales pitch, and I go, maybe not for us. But having used it, absolutely, we would go back to it again. So something like that. The Michigan yeast from Bluestone, we'll probably have a look at it again, I reckon. And then we sit up here now and don't really have the capacity to sit and compare them as much as what you guys are. But it'd be nice to sit here and actually assess them quite properly and work out where the intricacies of the recipes and the process and the brewer challenges or pinch points were, so that you would effectively come up with this we think is the best case scenario. Okay then, let's go and do that and see where that falls.
Well, I think for us, we didn't go in with any particular goal of this is, yes or no, this is beer, but we wanted to enjoy the process, use the new products that we hadn't used before, and then come back and compare. We're obviously a lot of a smaller brewer and with less experience than everyone, but to see how, with the same ingredients and the same instructions, how everyone did it differently, and take that away to inform what we do going forward.
Anyone else?
It was a great opportunity to be asked to do it, and to try those different products was fantastic. The malt was great. The Flex product was very interesting, and on a homebrew level, I've got a bottle there that'll probably last about 10 years, I reckon. So I'll probably use it again, or give it to some of our other club members. And the hops, because they were current season hops, they were so fresh, and they were great. I didn't expect them to be as good as they were, put it that way. So, yeah, it was good. So, really enjoyed it. It was a bit of a shit show, but, you know, that's typical for me.
I love the videos you sent me as well. I wish I could show them, but I didn't include them. But, yeah, it is amazing the difference in the equipment, and you can still produce such a great beer. Like, it is crazy.
Yeah, crazy.
I just had a thought. You were talking about wanting to analyse them. I don't know if Jack, did you guys want to add anything then? I didn't give you an opportunity. It's okay. Okay. Will, you were talking about wanting to analyse these beers further, and you talked about, I think Jack and yourself talked about beer judging. How do you approach that kind of process? Obviously, you're not sitting on stage with a microphone.
I don't know. I've judged beer for quite a few years now, and I don't know. It's another skill set that I find as a brewer that you lock into, so I sent you through some, and Jack, some relatively extensive tasting notes for our beer that. Yes, I did throw them through ChatGPT to express
it wasn't obvious, actually.
But they're based on, I don't know, it's something that and this is what I say, like I'd love to sit here now for 5-10 minutes and just go through them and mark some notes. There's a reason there's a phone there, because I was hoping to go through them and just mark the attributes that from an aroma or an appearance, aroma, flavour, mouthfeel, technical ability, and then an overall comment on the beer. So that then, particularly in this flight, because they are based on the same recipe and stuff, and then I think it's just, it's like anything. It's like when you ride a bike, you know that if you ride 10 kilometres on the flat compared to 10 kilometres on a upper hill or something, that's going to be a slower time. So you have that 10 kilometres as a basis. Same here, flight to 5, same beer. You have something similar to adjust to. So from a judging point of view, I find it relatively easy to flick into that and are able to do it because I have done it for a period of time and have experience on that. And I find it a really easy way. I certainly don't go out to pubs and stuff and sit there with a notepad and stuff and assessing it. But if I'm at home and something struck my fancy, or you want to compare a couple of beers, it becomes the ability to sit down and do that. Gives you a great basis point from a sensory point of view to be able to compare a couple of beers.
I think the other key thing too is there's beer judging and there's enjoying drinking beer. And I didn't say it before when we were talking about were we stoked to make the beer, but from my perspective, like nothing against the beers or the recipe, but it's another pale ale. But what beer does is it's a leveler, and it creates conversation and it brings everyone together, and you can drink it by yourself or you can drink it in a room with a bunch of people while I sit here with a microphone in my hand. And I think that's, from a social perspective, that's an enjoyment piece for us from this collaboration or this event. The other thing when it comes to sort of interpreting beer is like, yes, when you're judging beer, you're judging it on the style guidelines, and it does get really nitty gritty. Like, this is an Australian pale ale and it's supposed to be clear or slight yeast haze. That's not, but it's delicious. So, like, does it matter? No. If you were judging it at a beer competition, yeah, it wouldn't do so well on the appearance scale, but it doesn't matter. So, beer judging, sure, it's interesting. You really dial your palate into off flavours, into sensory perception, all that sort of stuff. You learn a lot from a brewer's perspective, but it's not the be-all and end-all. If you want to brew a perfect Hefeweizen, it needs to taste like banana. It needs to have clove characteristics, all those things. But if you just want to brew a great tasting wheat beer and it doesn't quite fit in the shoebox that is a Hefeweizen, it doesn't matter. It's still not a bad beer if you can't score it perfectly. So I think there's beer judging, but there's enjoying drinking beer. And from our and I would presume most of you in the room, because you're here, enjoying drinking beer is the key. And yeah, everyone can box you in and you can say, oh, this isn't an IPA, this isn't a hazy, this isn't a German lager. But at the end of the day, if the beer's good and you're happy to drink it, it doesn't really matter.
Now, can I just put in a shameless plug for the state home brewing competition next Saturday, which will be held at Hobart Brewing Co. So if you're interested in coming along, maybe being a judge at that, 10:30, Hobart Brewing Co. next Saturday.
If we got any more questions in the audience, pop your hand up and read, or someone will come with the microphone. Oh, Jules? Yep.
Just interested in the comments on the flex hop, and maybe this is one for the HBA rep, but are your hops available to retail at any stage, and will they be available locally, the flex style? And just a follow-up question, if recovery wasn't an issue, what would be your next choice of bittering hop for this style?
I mean, the HBA perspective, I think that was, are they available for everyday wholesale? Was that the question?
For retail.
For retail, they are. I mean, the homebrew shop, or both homebrew shops actually, or any online homebrew shop will sell HBA product. They'll often buy like a 5 kilo foil and break them down into more usable quantities for T90s. Liquid extract, that's a Phil question. No, he's shaking his head. No, I mean, for example, we...
not flex.
Our brew was a 300, I can't remember what our kettle full was, 430 litres, and I think we used like 20-something grams. So if you scale that down, like I'm not sure how many grams you guys threw in there, but it would have been small. 5 grams, yeah. So they're really, the liquid flowable products are really designed for thousands of litres, not so much on the small scale. Was it an efficiency, wastage, or...
I was interested if you didn't use flex, what would be your next bittering hop choice?
I think that's real brewer preference, especially with bittering hops. There's some people don't even use bittering hops, believe it or not, in the kettle. They'll throw all their bitterness in the whirlpool. We use a couple of different bittering hops. We use Centennial as one of our favourites, and Magnum. We tend to lean for high alpha. We want to use as little possible from a vegetal matter. So the higher the alpha acid, the higher conversion you get for bitterness units. So you don't need to use as much. But we want a really clean, neutral bitterness. We don't want too much of that. I keep saying it, but grippiness, metallic characteristic. So we have a couple of varieties that we like to bitter with. It also comes down to what's available, the price. Believe it or not, before the industry took a bit of a turn, you had to contract a lot of hops when you're starting brewing volume, like large scales over the year. You can't just call up Phil and say, Phil, I need another 50 kilos tomorrow. It's more like, well, you didn't contract it 2 years ago, so you're going to have to find it from someone else. It's a little bit different with the market the way it is at the moment. So we're chewing through a bunch of bittering hops that we contracted a couple of years ago. They're great hops and they're current vintages, but current crop years, but they're the ones we locked in knowing we were going to use them. So it's from a bittering hop perspective, it's definitely brewer preference, and there's a lot of great bittering hops out there. The only caveat would be if you're trying to brew technically true to style beers that you want to enter in a beer awards, or just tick the box and say, I brewed this traditional German lager the way it's supposed to be brewed. If you're brewing it in Germany, there are certain varieties that you should be brewing with, so that's probably the main difference.
Next audience question. Jules is finding someone. Yep.
I'm just curious for potentially all 5 of you, free of market constraints, driven only by your passion, curiosity, and creativity, what would be the style of beer that you would brew should you dedicate like the next year to mastering it?
Lambic.
I was about to say exactly the same thing. Something to sit in barrels and let the wild yeast and bacteria do what it's going to do. Much more creative, much less process controlled.
I like sour beers, and so lambics is something we've got into, and we've brewed things like Flanders Red Ale, Old Brewing, all these sour beers, but also like lagers. Okay, lagers are good because you brew them and they're actually better if you leave them, lagering, which is just basically put them in the fridge, and their flavours develop over a number of months, and they're great beers as well. hoppy beers, I don't make as many of them as I used to, and they're a bit problematic. Sometimes they keep well, and other times they oxidise and get funny flavours, and so they're sort of more likely to be dumped if you don't drink them quick enough. And as I'm getting older, I don't drink as much as I used to. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think like anyone, something that you're not doing on a Monday to Friday basis is fun. We run a Monday to Friday shift work production brewery, so beers that we're not brewing 5 days a week is interesting. And obviously, as everyone said, the curiosity comes in that mixed culture ferment space, and they're different every time, which is like, that might sound not unusual for lots of people, but for people like us, where we want our pale ale to taste exactly the same because we want the consumer to be like, I know what this beer tastes like. Different every time is sort of like a different realm for us. So yeah, spontaneous ferments and mixed culture bacteria beers are super interesting.
For me, we haven't done a lot of exploration, so if we had no constraints with all of that, it'd be a trip around Europe and find what tickles the palate.
I'm going to throw in a question. What did you learn from this experiment? And if there's anything to change, what would you have done differently?
I learnt that I'm very disorganised. I have good plans, and I probably should read the instructions a bit more closely.
The main thing I was looking to get out of it was to compare dry hopping times with everyone else and see if you could get a little bit of an edge with a day earlier or a day later to get some more aroma out of it. And like Will said, I think that's probably going to take a bit more sitting down and analysis, and hopefully we can do that.
I've just learnt that there's a lot more to it that I'm looking forward to exploring, that we've touched on, and just that even if you're brewing the same beer, doesn't mean you're brewing the same beer.
For us, obviously, the adoption of flex moving forward will probably be there. From the recipe point of view, I'm not sure whether the chit malt needs to be in there or necessarily to the percentage that is there. And it's certainly noticed in the haze that occurred through most of the beers. But I think more importantly is obviously it's a beer like this affords us the ability to go out and try something. Curiosity will always get the better of me, and I think I speak holistically of the panel that I'd like to see a wine event do something like this. It just wouldn't happen. So in itself, thank you for you in accepting this, and the rest of the brewers here, and Matt and Kelsey for doing this again, because it allows us to explore, try, do stuff that you guys sit here and you either pick holes in or you enjoy, and it's at the end of the day we stand at the bar and we have a beer and we all have a good time. So thank you.
Probably for us is just the use of Eclipse. Like, it's a hop we've used once or twice in the big brewery, but quite light-handedly because we don't know it. So it was really nice to really dial it up more than we probably would have and get a feel of it.
Great. It's been a great experiment. I've actually amazed by the results. I was so scared we're going to have 5 of the same beer, and we did not end up with that. So it's amazing. After some high-tech playing around on stage, I got it on my phone to cast the TV while you were asking questions. You didn't even notice. But these are the responses that you have put in while we've been drinking the beers. So this is the kind of a word cloud for Moo Brew's experiment, balanced and clean, the kind of the big words that come up, which is characteristic Moo Brew, I think. I don't know how to turn the page. I've hit it. There it is. Here we go. High tech. Hopfields, bitter. That is the biggest word there. But I think that a lot of the word I've heard is that Hopfields is the favourite. So we'll see what happens.
Bitter doesn't necessarily mean bad as well.
No. Van Diemen's, bitter again. Also sweet. King, I can see the word king. I don't know what that means, but king is there. King Island, bitter again. There is a lot of bitter represented on this.
Very descriptive.
There's bitter, but there's also bitterness, but also not as bitter. So, so it all comes down to perception. Hobart Brewers, fruity. Yep, definitely. Light. And that was the high dry hopping. Like that was what brought that fruitiness through. All right, the next slide is going to be what everyone preferred. I haven't actually looked at what this is. There's no trophy or anything like that, and there's no reward, but here we go. Are you ready? Oh, I can't even read it. It is 38% Hobart Brewers, 38% Hopfields. So we have a draw in a competition that doesn't really exist. But it is interesting to see because, you know, there is a lot of difference in what everyone preferred. I really liked Hopfields, liked Moo Brew probably Van Diemen probably second, then Moo Brew. So it all comes down to perceptions, hey? Thanks so much. That's awesome. Kelsey.
Yeah, so thanks again to our amazing panel. You've all been really good sports and you're here for the same reason we're all here. We all love beer and science. So thanks again for going out on a limb and experimenting with us. Thanks to Shambles again and to Cornell and Henry who designed the recipe. And they're always our biggest fans. I don't know why that's written there. Thanks, Matt. They're our biggest fans. Okay. Thanks to everyone who has supported Science Made Bearable through ExBEERimental Science event as this is part of National Science Week. So you'll notice there's a whole lot of other National Science Week events going around Hobart, so check them out as well. Please make sure you're following us on Facebook or Instagram. We'll try and keep up to date with posting interesting beer stuff, and we'll aim to repeat do another iteration of the event next year. Funding pending. We would also love your feedback for the event, and through you buying tickets, we have your emails, and we will be sending out a post-event survey that we would love feedback on. We use this feedback to try and get our funding from grants, so please give us your thoughts.
And for making the event better.
And also we would love suggestions on what you would like to see in the next event. Each year we build on what we've been doing. Experiment in different ways. Give us your thoughts about what you want to see Brewers doing next year. But thank you for all attending. It's been amazing seeing how many people show up, and thanks for your support.
Thanks.